The Project Appraisal tool lets you do a dry run of how your CFO might assess your project. If he or she is comfortable trying the tool themselves, it might even be a forerunner of a new, more inclusive and rigorous way of assessing the attractiveness of any project in the 21st century. Let's take a look at how it works. As indicated in the heading of this worksheet, it provides a structured decision-making approach to appraising a capital expenditure request. So it uses a multi-criteria analysis, an MCA, and it gives the decision makers a chance to determine the relative weight or importance of each decision-making criteria and scoring the performance of projects against the criteria. The most important part is the weighting. And depending on the mindset of the decision maker or decision makers, they could be more oriented to heavily weight the do the right thing part, or the capture opportunity part, or the mitigate risk part. So you have a chance to kind of put yourself in their shoes and see from their perspective how the weighting of these might look and how the scoring of the business case elements against those weights and those criteria might also look. So let's scroll down and take a look at the tool. So the first thing you'll notice is that some of these fields are already filled in. So while we've been completing the other worksheets, not only have they been feeding the overview worksheet, they've also been feeding this one. So the data from those have been copied into this one, including the purpose fulfillment field from the overview worksheet itself. So these are not white fields. You don't have to fill them in again. They're simply copies of fields which are in other worksheets. And that's true for all of the numbers as well. If we scroll down a little bit further, there are some numbers here. And again, this should look very familiar because it's very similar to the way in which these were portrayed on the overview worksheet. The difference is in the appraisal tool, we're going to score how well all of these do. And we're going to have a weighted set of criteria by which we are going to judge these as well. So let's start with the idea of weighting these criteria. And as you can see, we've started off with an assumption that the do the right thing cluster is worth about 1/3 of the weight, capture opportunities is about 1/3, and mitigate risks is about 1/3. So the worksheet has a starter set of assumptions about how these are going to be weighted just to get you started. And that's explicit in the title where it says the weights and the scores are starter values, and you replace them with the decision maker's consensus on what they should be. So let's assume that you think that your CFO might weight these slightly differently. Rather than 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, maybe it's going to be more like 50% for the capture opportunities part, 20% for the do the right thing part, and maybe 30% for the risk mitigation part. So let's fill those in and see how that looks. So we've changed the do the right thing weighting, this column, to 20%. We've changed the weight of the capture opportunities cluster to 50%, and we've changed the mitigate risk cluster weight to 30%. And you'll notice that there are some of these fields now that are in deep red. In other words, they're showing that there's something wrong with them. And that's because these were generated on the assumption of the previous weight being divided this way. And now that we've changed that previous weight, we need to rebalance this column here. So now we need to rebalance this 20% across the purpose fulfillment element and the progress on the company's ESG goals. So if it's 20% altogether, let's set this one at 10%. Let me try that again. So 10% there. And we can do 10% here. So now that balances to 20% and the spreadsheet is happy. Same kind of thing for capture opportunities. We need to rebalance these and rebalance the ones at the bottom. And after we've done that, it might look like this. So what we've done here is we've done a rebalancing, and we've put a little bit more weight on the ROI financial analysis and on the capital expenditure than it was before. So what we've done is we've taken a rough crack at how important each of these elements might be to the people making the decision or the person making the decision. So that's what the weighting is all about. How important are these as they try to decide whether or not this project is something that they want to approve? And then what we do is we take a look at how each of these is meeting the criteria. That is to say, the results that we have generated in the workbook, the things in light purple, how do they meet the criteria associated with this? So on a score of 0 to 5, we've scored each of these. You can change those scores if you think the decision maker might score them differently, higher or lower. And what the spreadsheet does is it does a calculation and shows what the weighted score would be. And actually, since those are calculated for you, we're going to change that column to a light purple because it's not one that you have to fill in. So that's better. The white cells are really the ones that you fill in, and the others are done for you. The calculations are done by the worksheet. So now what we've got is the ability to look what a weighted justification score for this project might look like, and it's a score of 405. By itself, that doesn't mean very much, but if there were a number of projects, each with its own workbook to show the business case for going ahead with that project, now we can compare that number for each of the proposed projects so that the person making the decision and the resource allocation can decide which of these projects is the best one and which ones perhaps the company decides not to fund because it only has so much capital and it has to make some tough decisions as to which ones don't make the cut. So that score is a useful one when it's comparing one project with another. But the value of this is it legitimizes some of these factors, which may be a little bit new in the decision-making process, as being legitimate things to be included in the mix when taking a look at the reasonableness, the attractiveness of projects that are being proposed in today's business environment. The good news is that there is considerable encouragement on the part of the accounting profession, bodies, the CPA organizations around the world, that these factors need to be, they should be, they are highly recommended to be included in the list of criteria that are being considered when taking a look at a project in the 21st century. Any project, not just sustainability projects, any project. And if that can happen, we will almost by osmosis change the mindsets of the people in the C-suite of the organizations so that they start to realize that good business decisions in the 21st century include consideration of the way in which those decisions are going to impact the environment and society so that we have a more holistic approach towards the way in which decisions are made for a resilient society. Would that be great or what? So go for it. Use the tool, enjoy it, share it, and let's make it go viral.